How does Howard's commitment to the MEAC affect the view of the conference? Ryan Nettles' departure from Alabama State may point to who the next quarterback's going to be, and two guys who just left the SWAC have landed on their feet. Oh yeah, it's HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And when the mic cuts off, that does not mean that the journey is over. You can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Now let's talk about Howard and how their commitment and reaffirmation saying, I'm staying with the MEAC. This is where I want to be. What does this mean for how the conference should be viewed in the future of the MEAC? Now, I wasn't going to believe that Howard was staying until Howard said they were staying for me. And I understand that they stayed silent. This was something that I talked about, I believe, on last Wednesday's podcast. And then later on that day, they came out and they said, I'm staying right here. It's almost like, you know what? I've heard enough people talking, but that Mouth of the South guy, that's why I draw the line. All right, we're not letting this guy talk about us no more. He wants a statement. We're going to give him a statement. And that statement was that we're staying with the MEAC. We want to win. We want to play high-level athletics here in the MEAC. And we've had a couple of packed days, but best believe we were going to get to this. This was way too important for us not to. And I was excited when I heard this news because I think that it's the best thing. I don't want the MEAC to die. I'll say this a countless amount of times. I know that I've spoken about the MEAC's vitality in a negative tone, and rightfully so, but that's just because of all the things that have been transpiring. They haven't been positive for the conference. When we have something good, I'm here for it. And that's Howard saying, I'm going to stay right here. And Howard is very successful at a bunch of sports. Football doesn't happen to be one of them. So I think a lot of people may not realize that. I'm kind of shooting off the hip, but I can say that Howard is or could be the best sports school in the MEAC. When you look at, yes, they're highlighted by the fact that they have the conference champion in women's basketball, but they're skilled in a bunch of other sports. We talked about this on last week's episode when we talked about what they were losing when the MEAC was losing Howard, what they were losing in that school. So if you haven't checked that one out, go ahead and check it out. Quick refresher, just that they've been really successful at a bunch of sports. I went more in depth on that episode, though. That's the type of school that you're getting back. But I do think that it's more than, oh, we're keeping a really good team in our conference. It's more than that. To me, it's the fact that Howard staying in the MEAC really could and probably should affect how other teams are looking at that conference. See, let's just reflect, right? We're talking about Chicago State coming in last week, and I said, oh no, Chicago State that's actually when I mentioned Howard leaving again. But I said Chicago State, they passed them up. You missed an opportunity. Howard is not going to be here. Basketball is going to be at a threshold where those things are kind of gone. You still have a little bit more breathing room than you did when I thought it was no Howard and you turned down Chicago State. But let's look at teams who might be saying no to the MEAC because it looks like a dying conference. Now, in a way, I look at this move similar to the Isaiah Land news from last week. I think we capped off our week with that. Isaiah Land chose to stay at FAMU instead of going to Georgia, LSU, two absolute football factories where just going to school there gets you a better chance of being drafted, getting a long career in the league. I've seen players who weren't good there get careers and be around because that stamp of having that university behind you holds a lot of weight. And then if you go there and you show out, oh, you're definitely getting drafted. So you passed up that to go to FAMU. This is similar in the way of, not that the CAA is some football factory that continues pushing out prospects and everything. It's not like that, clearly. And it's more than just a school, it's a conference. But this is a conference that's been enticing to somebody. This is a conference where people have been being pulled over there. I get the allure. And I thought that Howard and them were a very good match. But I'd rather do it right here. And the one thing that they have in common is the fact that Howard saying, I don't want to go to the CAA. I'd rather choose the MEAC. And Isaiah Land saying, I don't want to go to these football factories. I'd rather choose FAMU. Is both of these situations are either a university or a player choosing an HBCU or choosing an HBCU conference over what would seemingly be greener grass or an easier path in some aspects. That's what they have in common. And that's what I look at when I see these. Now, people were questioning the MEAC and the vitality of the MEAC. Would the MEAC even last until 2025? Now we can kind of slow down. We can kind of breathe for a second, because I'm not going to sit here and say that it's perfect now, but Howard kind of removes this idea of, oh my God, the sky is falling. That's gone. I felt like when Howard left, you're sitting there looking like, man, I don't know who is going to beat. You got to add somebody, because this isn't going to last. That feeling has kind of subsided. I believe that when it felt like the sky was falling, I think schools saw that and probably acted accordingly. Now that Howard's there, it doesn't feel like that. And I would almost go to say that Howard showing their commitment to the MEAC could be just as impactful as another team joining the MEAC. And at a time when everybody's leaving and everybody's quitting on the MEAC, it might even be more impactful, because yes, a school coming in, it kind of gives a little bit of rejuvenation and says, all right, this conference is still trying to build up. They're on their way back, or could be on their way back. But Howard staying says, we still see a future here. And I think that's going to be major. And at a time when everybody's leaving, it might have needed somebody saying, I'm not quitting on them. There's a reason people left, but there's also a reason that people are not quitting. There's a reason they didn't just disband and everybody departed. I think that is how it's going to impact the future going forward. And with all the good things, here's the thing. With all the good things that I'm hearing about the recruiting class for Howard and Eden James and how they all been balling in spring practice, they could get better at football. And now you're looking at one of the most prominent HBCUs shining in an HBCU conference, and other schools are going to see that, and other schools are going to recognize that you had an opportunity to leave and you chose not to. That can be just as impactful as another school joining in. And speaking of leaving, we're going to talk about a couple of guys who have left HBCUs. One of them did it on their own terms. The other two left, but they landed on their feet. Let's start off with Ryan Nettles, who is entering the transfer portal and is leaving Alabama State. I think this may be a statement about the current state of the quarterback situation. But first, let me tell you about Built Bar, because Built Bar is the best protein bar on the market. And to me, Built Bar is a tad bit confusing, because I've been trying to eat healthy for a while, and I'm glad Built Bar is around because it makes it so much easier. But I look at flavors like banana cream pie or cookies and cream, and they feel like they should be fattening, right? They feel like they should be so sweet. It feels like a protein bar that's covered in chocolate should not be this good for me. But they do have these delicious flavors that sound good. They sound, it's not bland. They have flavor. Then they also are covered in chocolate, but they still give you the same protein, 17 grams of it, only 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs. It blows my mind. And when it gets really crazy is when they get to the Built Puffs, and they cover that same protein bar with chocolate, but it also has marshmallow around it as well. And now you're looking at marshmallow, chocolate, and still healthy. Sign me up right now. My mouth watering right now just thinking about it, right? So y'all need to go to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your offer, because you can't sit here and tell me that covered in chocolate, wrapped in marshmallow, protein, that doesn't sound even a little bit appealing. All right, so we keep on rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. And today's word of the day is darling, meaning a dearly loved person or a favorite. And speaking of darlings, I hope you did something good for your mother yesterday on Mother's Day, or some of the women in your life that you know have kids. Because, I'm calling people, hey, tell your mom I say happy Mother's Day, people who like moms to me. I'm doing stuff for my mom on Mother's Day, of course, calling people I know. My sister got a kid. Happy Mother's Day to you too, right? Things of that nature. Do something. I hope you did something special for him. That's all I got. I'm gonna leave it at that. But let's talk about Ryan Nettles, because Ryan Nettles is transferring out of Alabama State. He just put his name in the transfer portal. In this move, in my opinion, could point to what the future is for Alabama State is at quarterback. And I don't just mean it's a Ryan Nettles-less future. No, I mean, I think it might tell you exactly who the guy is going to be. Now, let's talk about him, because last time we talked about Nettles, he was in the midst of a quarterback battle, and we were talking about how Dee Davis was inserting himself into the battle. But before that even happened, there was 3 guys who were fighting it out during spring practice. Instead of making it a quartet, Nettles has respect out of the competition. And I think his transition from Alabama State darling after his rookie year, we'll talk about what that is in a second, but after his rookie year to being a transfer is something that's kind of remarkable. And it's not what I expected, because when Davis came in, if I had to just bet on it, and if I did have to bet on it, I would only do it on Bet Online, of course. But if I did have to bet on it, I would say that Nettles would be the guy who was competing with Davis. And from an objective standpoint, he made the right decision for himself. And I don't mean that like a cliche, he made the right decision. Let's first acknowledge that he has 3 years of eligibility. The reason that I call it a rookie year with air quotes is the fact that he really had 2 freshman years. That spring season that he played didn't count towards eligibility. This was his real freshman year. It's almost like a red shirt, but it wasn't. So I'm just going to call it his rookie year, because he was a freshman that year. I don't know what I'll do for all the other classifications. If you was a junior that year and you got a free year of eligibility, I don't know. I don't know what I'll call it. But for the freshman, I'll call it a rookie year, and then a freshman year, or prep year, whatever, however you want to phrase it, right? That's up to you. But he was balling that year. He was the rookie of the year for the SWAC. I mean, he was the best freshman. So when you look at that, you're like, how did we get here today? How did we get to a situation where this guy is saying, I no longer want to be here? That's because he didn't play well. He didn't. In the second year, his freshman year, he just did not play well. It started off really slow for him. He might have been able to start getting some things together, but it was never really great. And then the coach gets fired. All of those things are not recipes for success. Now, what it tells me personally is that he's not the guy. Him leaving, he's not the guy. He not only was he not the guy, I think it was clear that they maybe had their eyes on somebody of who was going to be the guy. Now, the reason I say he made the right decision for himself is, all right, if you leave or if you stay, you're going to waste the year of eligibility, because you didn't leave because you said, I don't want to be here anymore. You likely left because you know you're not going to be the starting quarterback. And with that's going to be sitting down with a clipboard in your hand, maybe hoping that you finally get a chance. And that's only probably going to come from injury, because if you thoroughly lost, we'll get into that in a second. Let me not get ahead of myself, but that's probably only going to come from injury. That's a waste of your time. I'd much rather go somewhere where I know I missed spring ball, so I'm probably not going to be the starter, but give me a year to get acclimated in the system, and I'll compete for the job next year. And instead of wasting a year of eligibility on a school that I know I'm not going to start at, and I don't think I have a future starting at least let me go somewhere where I think the chance may not be immediate, but it is coming. I know that I'm going to get a chance at, I don't know, I'll just use something, South Alabama or something like that, right? I'm just thought of the next school that wasn't in the SWAC in Alabama. That's what I think would be good for Ryan Nettles. Now, his departure, like I said, means he's not the guy. But why would he leave? There's only 2 things that it could mean. 1, he was thoroughly beat out in the quarterback competition in the spring. I don't think that's the case. I really don't. I just don't think it's likely to me, because everything I hear is that it was very close. They were real close. And you don't go from being real close in the spring to being thoroughly beat out in a way that you know you're not getting the job. Or secondly, Dee Davis is going to be the guy. That's more likely to me, because there's so much going on, or so much that is at play with just the trio of guys that were there in the spring, that with Dee Davis showing up with the resume and the hype that he has around him, and to now say I'm entering the transfer portal, I think that he is the newest variable in if I had to point to anything that made this go and really put the battery in the back of saying, all right, I got to go, it's likely that guy. It is. It's a tough thing for Nettles. You went from having a great first year and during the spring, you had a bad second year. You probably ate away at the leash. You probably didn't have as much favor because the new coaches came in and he didn't give you the benefit of the doubt. And now you have a high profile transfer coming in at a position that can only put one on the field at a time. That's how he went from being a darling at Alabama State to being a transfer. Now, going forward, we're going to talk about two guys who have also left HBCUs, but they didn't really do it under their own will. They were kind of pushed out, maybe a resignation, depending on how you want to look at it. We're talking about Courtney Gaucher and we're talking about Broderick Fobbs and how they have landed on their feet since leaving their HBCU. But first, I want to talk about betonline.net because betonline.net is the best place for all of your sports wagering. If you're looking at the NBA playoffs, the Suns and the Mavericks just had a crazy game where the Mavericks were absolutely on fire from three. Luka didn't even have to do as much as far as being so efficient from the field because you had the supporting cast going. That was a great game for some of the over-unders. If you want to take the over-under on Finney Smith, if you took the under on Chris Paul's points, you likely got it because he fouled out and he had more points or he had less points than fouls. So you're looking at a situation like that. You're going to have the Grizzly coming up. You're going to have the Grizzly versus Warriors. You're going to have the Bucks versus Celtics. You're going to have so many really good games on the docket that BetOnline is the only place that you will need to go to wage on all because they are the fastest and easiest way to wage on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every single day. I'll continue to tell you that because I really do appreciate it. Now I want to talk about Courtney Gaucher, and I also want to talk about Broderick Fobbs because they may have left their HBCUs, Grambling and FAMU respectively, but they landed on their feet in situations that I think they're probably both happy with. And some may look at it as a step down, but I think that they're happy with their decision. And I think specifically I want to start off with Gaucher, actually. Now, he left FAMU under some circumstances that people may say it was this, people may say it was that. Even the deal that people are saying made him resign, I think he did with good intentions. And some would say it was a good deal. He just didn't go through the proper channels and everything to do them. And I'm not excusing him of that. But I'm just saying that the well-intentioned nature was there because he actively has tried to get FAMU better. And that's something that Tulane is going to really benefit from. You have a guy who is consistently trying to find a way to improve the visibility of the school, make the school better. And now he is going to be the senior associate athletic director. And he's going to be oversight and operations and sports oversight of football and Olympic sports. You're looking at a guy who has always done everything he possibly could to help out FAMU. There's multiple. I haven't heard people say bad things about Gaucher out of FAMU personally. And now you're bringing that to Tulane, a school that has more resources, and he'll probably be able to use those same resources. If he goes in with the same attitude that he had at FAMU, I know he's not the athletic director, but he goes in with that same attitude, you'll see them be able to do a lot because they have more resources at their disposal. So I'm excited to see what he does. Rumors are he's already in New Orleans, getting ready and getting acclimated. So I'm happy for him landing on his feet. Now, I want to talk about Broderick Fobbs because he's the more interesting one to me as far as landing on his feet and what he decided to do. Now, Fobbs went from being a head coach at Grambling on a collegiate level to being a running back coach at Ruston High, on the high school level being a positional coach. But I think he's happy. You got to remember that he's been at Grambling for 8 years. He got hired at the end of 2020, or he got fired at the end of 2021, but he got hired at the end of 2013. So he's there for 8 years. So he's been in this area and he's staying in the area with Ruston and everything of that nature. But this is a guy who is familiar with the area, but he's also familiar with doing things a certain type of way. And that's being a collegiate coach, head coach. He's been the running the ship. For him, this move is great for his work-life balance. It's something that he's talked about, right? And I don't think he's just talking on the bright side of things. I think he loves having less responsibility, or the idea of having it, because he hasn't done it yet. But I think that he loves the idea of having less responsibility because it allows his time to be freer. or more free, excuse me. And this is what he said. He said, it's really been about being around here and going to all the practices and games and being able to really support my own kids for a change. I pulled into so many other people's kids for years. And that now I'm doing it with my own children. Now, you can't look and say, man, that feels like my kid because I'm taking care of them all the time. I'm doing this. I'm really caring for these people as if they were my own. Now, as a positional coach, you have more time. You can free things up. And I'm looking at this situation because even the location of where he decided to coach is about work-life balance. It has to do with family. It all comes back to his kids. And he's working at Ruston, which is, it's the same area, right? It's like 20 minutes or whatever from Grambling. And he said, we've been through this. We've been through a lot as a family. There's a lot of change going on in my family. My daughter is going into high school as a 9th grader, and my younger daughter is coming up right there. It's one of those things where we just wanted to stay put and see what happens. Now, you see that. So I'm assuming that the daughter is going to go to Ruston High School. Then the other daughter who's right behind her will probably go to Ruston High School. And it allows you to be flexible. It allows you to have the time because you're only doing the running backs coach. Now you can be more a part of their life than you were already because you were asked to do a lot for the last 8 years. Mind you, that kid's going into 9th grade. So dad's been coaching. She was a 1st grader. It's just putting that kind of stuff into perspective. And we can touch on the athletic side of it because this is a show that covers HBCU athletics, right? Even though I feel like that work-life balance is the most important part. The Ruston High running backs are going to have the benefit of having a 3-time SWAC coach of the year focusing on their position. It's just that simple. The offense should be better because of it. So we touched on it, we dabbled on it just briefly because at the end of the day, the important thing, we can talk about athletics all we want, but the important thing is just the livelihood and the fact that at this time in his life, Coach Fobbs might have landed in a situation that allows him to perfectly balance being a coach, but then also being a dad and being in his daughter's lives when they need to go to practice and be at games and making sure that he's available more than he might have been over the last 8 years. That's the biggest takeaway. And that's why I wanted to put those things into perspective. And that's what we do here on Locked on HBCU. That's why you need to continue making us your first listen of the day every day. In tomorrow's episode, we're going to have Mo Carter coming on to talk about the livelihood of Alabama A&M after Aqeel Glass has left. I'm very excited to see what he has to say about what should we expect from the Bulldogs and what should we expect from Glass going forward at Tampa Bay. Interesting things. Now, this is a conference show, but this is not the only one on the network. Go check out Locked on ACC, Locked on SEC, Locked on Big 12. Well, I know a lot of us have some allegiances outside of just our HBCU, maybe the biggest school in whatever state that we grew up in as well. We're a fan of that team as well. I get it. Go listen to the conference shows and they'll give you on your other, your secondary school, call it that, right? Now, in the meantime, in between time, y'all know where y'all can find me. You can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.